What is up, my Pro Design Builder family? I'm Sam, also known as the Pro Design Builder, bringing to you another training video. So today we're going to be talking about an exciting topic, which is how to calculate hard and soft costs. All right, so one of the ways that you put a package together for your development project is truly knowing and understanding the cost. So I felt like this training was going to be very important for you to understand how to count the sticks and bricks, and also how to calculate all of the ancillary costs with consulting and engineering and architecture and stuff like that. So I felt like this was vital, but for anybody that don't know, this group is specifically for real estate investors that are looking to make the leap into new development projects. I'm Sam, I'm your guide. I've been through a number of hoops to get to where I'm trying to go, and I'm just trying to help the next investor make the same jump without the hurdles that I had to face. So I'll tell you a little bit about me since there's new people to the group. Uh, I'm a serial entrepreneur, and back in the day, my wife had gotten into med school, and one day she wrote me a letter. She said, "Sam, I don't want to go. I don't foresee us having the family unit that we envisioned having." And luckily for us, that was the right decision at the time. I was not happy. I'm a power couple type of guy. I was seeing this big vision of us doing this thing together, da 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 da. But family is at the heart of who I am. If you don't know much about me, I'm a foster dad. I'm an adoptive dad. I've adopted twins. I'm very active in my community when it comes to foster work. That's definitely my life's work. So I invest my time there in family. So if she was gone as a doctor in doing residency and in the islands and stuff like that, it actually probably wouldn't have even worked. So luckily she made that move, and that kind of created an opening for me to jump into real estate. I remember asking her one day, "So you're gonna stay back, and what are you gonna do?" And she handed me the book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. So I went through the book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. It spoke to me loud and clear. And then we went to a seminar for Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it really kind of opened my eyes on what is the next move, what is the plan. At the time, I owned a body shop and a car dealership, and I wanted to get into real estate. So she was kind of like, "All right, well, I could get my license, and you could work on wholesaling and flipping houses and stuff like that." So I was like, "All right, that's a plan." All right, so I had to go to one more seminar, fortune builder seminar, to kind of really get the confidence to do this new thing that I've never done. Right, so I went to that seminar, and coming out of the seminar, I said, "You know what? I'm going to just start taking massive action." Right, which is what is required if you're going to ever make this transition into new development, because it's very, very technical. There's a lot of money involved, and you truly need to be a professional at the next level, right, to truly understand this. But anyways, so what happened was I was green. Right, I started getting on the phone. I knew how to make the phones ring. So I started putting out bandit signs. I started having the phone ring. I would get a property under contract. I didn't even know what an escrow was, right? But I had a buddy named Mike at the title company that I could call, and he could tell me, right? So that's the importance of having a guide or having a mentor, right? So I would call Mike, and he would tell me, "Hey, put this on the escrow line," or "Put this, make sure you initial each page," or this and that, right? So that just lets you know how green I was as an investor. So from there, I was able to, flip some properties as a wholesaler, but I wasn't content there. I said, "You know what? I had to make the leap into house flipping." Right, so similar to a lot of people, I went on YouTube University. I figured out how to do certain things, and I kept growing and kept building on those skills. And when I had my first house flip, it went well, right? But there's a caveat to it, right? So on my first flip, I hired a contractor, and then I fired a contractor. I hired a second contractor, and then I fired a second contractor. I hired a third contractor, and on my third contractor, I got through the project. Luckily, investors and I both made money on the project because we just bought it right. But it told me right away that this business has contractor problems, and I probably wasn't ever going to be happy with the level of execution and what I was seeing from the contractor. So I started establishing myself, started running my own projects. I got really good at getting in and out of projects, and I had an investor out of Colorado, and from there he was transitioning from living in Florida. He was transitioning out, and I decided to, go with construction full time. But I got to be honest with you, it wasn't easy, right? Because initially I copied what the other contractors were doing, but after 2 years of doing it, I was very unhappy. And I said to my wife, I was like, I don't think I could ever be happy, in this business. But what happened was, I decided that next year to find education. I found some groups. I found a Facebook group similar to this Facebook group that you found here, and some people started to pour into me, right? And from there I went to a summit, and I met my mentor named Jeff, and Jeff was doing about $11 million a year. And I reached out to Jeff, and I said, hey Jeff, I got a crazy idea. I want to come up and I want to shadow you. Right? I want to shadow your business. I haven't been in a business in construction that was doing that. I was still doing small numbers in construction. So what happened was Jeff said, come on through. Right. So I shadowed Jeff for 3 days, and I just took notes. I sat in every meeting. He answered every question, and it really educated me. I really started to apply these different concepts in design build, which is the base of my knowledge, and the base of how and why I do everything, because it solves so many problems, right? So as a design build general contractor, my job is to take it from concept to completion, right? So when I meet the owner of the property, I initially start with some concepts, and then I get the architect involved, and then we start putting together hard plans, and then I pull my designer in, then we start picking finishes, and we start really managing the whole project from the concept and drilling down on the numbers, right? So for the last 8 years, I've been a design build general contractor. I've worked on a number of luxury homes, built custom homes, built development projects, and something told me that investors would benefit more from my knowledge base if I brought this to them, right? So, that's kind of why I started this group. I really wanted to invest in the next investor. I really feel like that's a passion project of mine. So that's why I started the Pro Design Builder, is to build the next set of builders, right? And developers. So today, let's jump into the subject topic we're talking about today. We're talking about hard and soft costs and how to calculate them, and the reasons why they're hard versus soft costs. So let's dive in, right? So let's first kind of define what is hard costs, right? So hard cost is the direct construction cost for physically building, right? So all of the sticks and bricks attached to putting up this structure, right? So not all of these categories are involved, but majority of them are. So let's kind of break this down on what it is, right? So you have your site work, right? So site work is typically land clearing. So if you have trees all over it, you need to clear the land, and then also grading for to have water run off a certain type of way and have the property look a certain way, or exposure a certain way, or your driveway you have to plan for. So that's the purpose of grading. Then you have your utilities, right? So whether it's public or private utilities, whether it's septic or city water connection. Then you have your plumbing, your electrical. All of that stuff is important in the site work and preparing for the structure to come up off the ground. So then you have your landscaping, right? So depending on what part of the country that you're in, specifically for me in South Florida, is going to require us to have a landscape architect, right? In most parts of the country, it does not require that, but in a densely populated area, they want to see a certain percentage of grass, they want to see a certain percentage of trees, and they are sticklers about that. So making sure that the site work. Another is your foundation, right? So what goes into that is your excavation, your concrete, your slab, right? So depending on the soil type, you might need piles, right? So piles are pretty much, they drill all the way down into bedrock because the soil may not be completely stable, right? So then now the structure, including your foundation, is sitting on top of the pile. So no matter what happens underneath the soil, and the soil changes, soil erodes and stuff like that, your house is sitting on the pile. So very expensive stuff, but very important to know and understand as you become a bigger developer, right? So waterproofing, right? So the areas that have basements, we don't have basements here in South Florida, so there's waterproofing, that is required because of, the certain type of soil type, and to not let water intrusion into those lower spaces. So that's going to be very important to calculate as well, right? So your structure, right? So you have your framing. You have, for us, we have block, masonry, stucco, steel, roofing systems. All of that's going to be important in establishing what your structure looks like. Then there's exterior finishes, right? So those are your windows, your doors, up north, your siding, your stucco, your facade changes if you're using rock, if you're using different types of faux finishes, like wood grain, panels and stuff like that. Those are going to be important for you to know and have already in your budget, right? So it's going to be important to lock in the details of your build is what's going to save you the cost, right? Costs are not going to run away from you when you lock it in up front. You make your decisions up front with your design, with all of your looks, and you don't change your mind. Your costs are not going to run away from you, right? Then you can lock in your builder, right? So from there, there's also interior finishes, right? So this includes your drywall, your flooring, your cabinets, your painting, your trim, right? Any decorative moldings that you may have on the walls, or if you have a coffered ceiling, right? So things like that will end up adding the price needs to be calculated in your hard costs, right? So then you have your MEP systems, right? So MEP is mechanical, electrical, plumbing, right? So what type of HVAC system does the build require, right? There's also 3 grades, all right? So there's always good, better, and best, right? Or we also say there's standard, there's mid-grade, and then there's luxury, right? And then that all depends on what area of the country you're in, what type of neighborhood. That's going to determine your package that you're going to provide for that particular living situation, right? And you need to have 3 separate packages for each, right? What's good is because we're accustomed to doing all of the design, one of the things that we provide is we provide design help for development projects, right? So that's kind of something that we have baked in that we love to do anyway. So to make life easier, and then instead of having to hire an outside designer, we can handle something like that for you in-house. So okay, so then we also have your general conditions. So temporary facilities, so temporary water, temporary electric, all right? If you have porta potties, if you have dumpsters, if you have site management, if you have a mobile mini on site, depending on the size of the project, right? So those are the types of things that are going to be important in establishing your hard costs, right? And then also too, your hard cost typically is about 65 to 75% of your actual cost of construction. So if you know that, this will start to help you calculate very quickly on what this construction cost is going to be, right? So now let's talk about some soft costs, right? And what they are and what they are not, right? So Soft costs is what we consider the brains and the paperwork of the operation, but you have to have both, right? There's no one without the other, right? So some of the common categories that you see in soft costs is going to be your design and your professional fees, right? So that's going to be your architect, your engineers, your consultants that are going to help you push this along. And then you have your permitting and approval. So your city fees, your zoning, your inspections, your environmental studies. These are all things that are part of the process of figuring out what it's going to cost to get this building off the ground. Then you have your financing costs. So loan origination, interest during construction, appraisal fees to make sure that this project is going to appraise and work, right? Then you have your legal and accounting fees. So contract, legal review, and tax consulting, right? So you always want to have your professionals hand in hand with any decision that you make, right? Reviewing those things for you. So then you have your insurance, which is borderline scam. Builder's risk, liability, but you kind of have to have it. So performance bonds on special type of projects, you may need a performance bond. But if you're building privately for yourself, you may not really ever encounter that. But that's typical if you're building, a type of developing a project for someone, you might need some sort of performance bond. All right, so then there's marketing and sales. So how are you going to stage this project? How are you going to market this project? Are you going to keep it? Are you going to buy and hold and just put it online and rent out the units? All of those things are going to be important, understanding and calculating how am I going to exit this particular property, right? And then you have your development fees, right? Developer fee, right? Which allows you to get paid during the project uh, while you're building the project, right? So very important stuff. So your soft cost is typically about 25 to 35% of the total project cost, right? So now you know that your hard cost is about 70% of the project, and then your soft cost is about 30%. So now this is what it's going to cost to get the project unearthed and off the ground, right? Get the building up in the sky. So now let's talk about some calculating costs and step-by-step framework on what you're going to need to do to get there, right? So first step is define the project scope, right? It's very important. I remember when I was a newer investor, right? I would allow the contractor to put together the scope of work, and then I realized very early on that that was the wrong way to do it, right? So the more details that you have, if you have each room planned out, you have each finish picked out, you have each thing selected prior to getting to the point where you hire a contractor, you can get the same prices for the same thing, right? It's mapped out for you. So although I hated this as a contractor, and you bring this project out to bid, right? So now everybody's bidding on the same thing, right? They know they have the same finishes, all right? So they know they have the same concrete work, they know they have the same drywall, they know they have the same framing. So everybody's on the same plane with the scope of work. And then now you could really see who's where as far as pricing. Very important stuff, right? So then you get cost estimates from get cost estimates, right? So hard costs, you might use a per square foot number for your hard costs, and an example right now would probably be about 200 to 250 a square foot. Depending on where you're at in the country, the number obviously could be higher. So you have to really pay attention to that to know if your project is going to pencil, right? Then your soft costs, obviously, you add the 25 to 30, 35% on top of that to get your soft costs. And then now you have your total cost of construction, right? So then you add some contingencies. Very important that you add contingencies just so things like inflation, things like tariffs that may affect the cost of construction don't affect you, right? And they affect you, but you planned for them in advance, right? So one of the things that I did well as a builder is once I got the quote, I would just go put the deposit down, lock in the price, order the material, and then from there I would store it or make some sort of plan for it for the things that were readily available. Then I'd create some sort of plan for it, but I locked in my price on my windows. I locked in my price on those important items that tend to creep up later, that I would get a email from my vendor that says, hey, listen, this is going up, right? So you're going to pay more than initially when the quote was submitted to you, right? So locking certain things in like that, buying some of the small things like your sinks, your faucets, your knobs and stuff like that, and then ordering it, checking off on it, and then storing it. So then now everything is here when it comes to this part is kind of how you lock in the price, right? And that's how you play the game, and you don't allow the fluctuations to affect you as much. Now, because you locked in your price with your material, your builder, if his price fluctuates, we already locked in that price, right? Unless they have some sort of escalation clause or something like that. But that's a different subject topic, right? So that's how you calculate the total cost of construction, right? So I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like for a 10 unit multifamily project, right? So let's just say this 10 unit multifamily project is about 12,000 square feet, right? So, and we're going to use a round number that's easy to work with. Let's say we're going to use $200 a square foot for this 12,000 square foot 10 unit building. And I'll just kind of break this down for you, right? So the hard cost on something like that for the 12,000 square feet is going to be about 2.4 million, right? So we're going to use the number 30% for our soft costs on top of our hard costs. So that's $720,000, right? Then we're going to always factor in our contingency. So 5% for the hard costs and then another 3% for the soft costs, right? And the total cost of construction is going to come up to 3.261 million, right? So that's how that particular project is going to look. Then you're going to factor in, obviously, your land costs, and you're going to look at the comps to determine what that exit is. So typically your exit is about 25 to 30 percent of the total project. If you did it right, if you priced it right, and typically your bank won't lend to you unless it's penciling right. So, we would definitely already get there. So let me just drop some pro tips on you before you go, right? So here's some pro tips, right? So always get multiple contractor bids, right? As much as I hate that as a contractor builder, you have to get contractor bid. But I'll tell you this: once you've established a relationship, you don't want to continue doing that with the bids, right? You want to use the relationship, and then also too, sometimes you do want to check your pricing once you've established a solid relationship with your builder. All right, use historical data from past projects. All right, so you want to use this historical data from what's going on with comps. Definitely using new projects that have closed and measuring along the way. Sometimes these projects takes a while to get off the ground. So you want to always use historical data to know how you're going to exit. So factor in inflation and volatility in materials. I shared some strategies on what that would look like for planning purposes on how to avoid some of that stuff. So update estimates as design evolve. So concepts, schematics, construction docs. All right, and then track actual versus estimates for future costs. Right, very important stuff. So having your estimate, your estimated versus actual, and seeing where the differences is, seeing if you might have to do a little pivot if something did increase is going to be very important in making sure that you're the best developer in the game and you're not getting stung, right? So hopefully you got some value from this teaching. Like I said, I'm Sam, also known as the Pro Design Builder. If you're gaining value from this video, give me a like, give me a thumbs up. Tell me if I'm doing all right, right? So reach out to me. I promise I don't bite. Like I said, we coach the next real estate investors to be developers. Have a great day.